John Barclay here at Spurs training ground, very windy training ground today after Ange Postecoglou's first proper press conference of the new season, in which he dropped quite a big bit of news. Not a good one, unfortunately, for Yves Bissouma. Bissouma has been banned by the club for the opening game against Leicester on Monday night after he filmed himself somewhat inexplicably inhaling laughing gas or nitrous oxide following the Bayern Munich friendly last Saturday. He went out to a party afterwards and filmed himself and put it on Snapchat. Laughing gas, nitrous oxide, he's not the first player to do it. He won't be the last player, but it is something that is now illegal as of last year. And whilst Ange, in typical Postecoglou style, was very measured in the way he talked about the incident and pointed out that Bissouma, who apologised publicly the day afterwards, had been very apologetic towards him and towards the rest of the squad over the incident. He did say, look, he reminded him of his responsibilities and the fact that as a role model, it's something you obviously can't do, and it is something he's a bit wrong and a very poor decision, and that there are sanctions that follow. It's a club decision to give him a one-match ban, but a part of the key point that Ange made was, whilst he's only going to be banned by the club for this one game, it does feel like he's got quite a bit more rebuilding of bridges to go after this particular incident. He said the phrase he used was trust building that he's going to have after this incident, both with Postecoglou himself and also with the rest of his teammates. Obviously, Spurs got a lot of young players. Bissouma is in a position now at age 26 where he should be setting an example for other players. He's wanted to have that sort of role model kind of role ever since Ange came in, and he's just sort of let himself down, really. So hopefully, and as Postecoglou has pointed out from throughout his press conference, he talks about how all human beings and footballers as well deserve second chances, and it's about how he recovers from this setback, really. But like I say, it does feel like it could be a little while before he has rebuilt that trust completely. And for Bissouma, it's a difficult one with Bissouma. I mean, he's someone that I watched a lot at Brighton when I used to cover them. I know what a fantastic player he can be. He showed it on numerous occasions at Brighton, particularly when he played against Chelsea. So when he signed for Spurs in a sort of £25 million deal, he thought it was a really good bit of business. And the start of last season, Ange's his second season, which after his first one under Conte was sort of ravaged by injury, and he got COVID in pre-season as well, which didn't help. But he started off, not just as probably Spurs' best player in the first month, but we were talking about him like he was the most on-form player in the Premier League. He was fantastic in that period, and then he got sent off at Luton for a bit of a silly dive just before half-time, getting a second yellow card, and he never really recovered. And we worked it out that after with this suspension from this incident, which is obviously completely different compared to an on-the-field suspension, that's his fourth one that he's had since that moment, because he obviously got sent off again against Nottingham Forest, and he had a ban as well for 5 yellow cards. He obviously plays holding midfield, so he's going to pick up yellow cards, but it just feels like he's had incidents on the pitch which have denied him sort of game time to really, which sort of created this kind of stop-start nature of his career last year. So going into this season, particularly with the signing of Archie, which is obviously a player that Spurs are very excited about. With the extra games in the Europa League, they need bodies. But Gray feels like, for a lot of fans already, as the sort of long-term answer potentially for that number 6 role. So pressure's on, really, in a way, for Bissouma to sort of nail down that place. And at his age, he's got plenty of time and his ability to make sure that it's his position. So to do something like this and have this situation crop up is just really the last thing he needed. And from Postecoglou, who's obviously dealt with many things over his course of his career as a manager, it's not the most outlandish thing he's ever had to deal with, but it's just not ideal going on into the season. But yeah, without Bissouma going into this game, that obviously does open the door for someone to take that number 6 position, if indeed he was even the obvious choice to start there, because there are options that Postecoglou's got. I mentioned Gray. Postecoglou was asked about him obviously signed for what was effectively a £40 million deal, 30 million with Joe Rodon going the other way in the summer, and he's impressed a lot during pre-season, despite being only 18. So he said he seemed like he was ready to play, ready to start. So he's obviously an option. The other option is Rodrigo Bentancur, who is a player that I think he's one of those players that all amateur footballers just wax lyrical over his ability. He's just such a naturally gifted footballer, but at the same time not quite sure, still not completely convinced where he fits in this midfield three for Postecoglou. I'm sure there is a position, there is a way, because he's such a talent. But with Maddison, when he's playing well, he's the obvious creator. Sarr, he's obviously much more than just energy, but the energy he brings is really, really useful to the team. And then holding midfielder like Bissouma when he's playing well, and his press-resistant kind of play of getting the ball out of defence and starting moves off makes a lot of sense too. Whereas Bentancur is kind of almost like not as good as those three players at those individual characteristics, but overall perhaps is a better all-round player. But with the way that Postecoglou plays, I'm still sort of wondering how it's going to work out for him. But this could be the moment, having played pretty well when he came on against Bayern Munich in the last game, maybe he starts and maybe he sort of lays down a marker, because obviously, and as Postecoglou pointed out, he is a player himself who's had a long-term injury that he's struggled with, and it takes time. Often we rush, we expect players to be back so soon when they're back playing, but there's a big difference between returning to play and returning to play like you did when you were playing brilliantly before you got injured. And sometimes with cruciate ligament injuries like Bentancur had, it sometimes can take a year. So it's a big season for him. It's a big season for Maddison as well. Obviously coming up against his old club on Monday. He's had obviously the disappointment of not making the Euros in the summer, but as someone who covered England throughout then, it was obviously quite a shock on the day when we were back here at Spurs' training ground when England were here, when he was the first player to be cut from Gareth Southgate's 33-man squad, which got trimmed down obviously to 26. But throughout the tournament, it wasn't very often, I'll be honest, with people was going, oh, should have taken Maddison instead. I mean, with the players they've got, it was probably the right call. So, and that kind of speaks to how much he faded, really. And again, comes back to what we're talking about, coming back from injuries and expectations, because whilst he was only out for probably, 2.5, 3 months, it's not like a year-long injury. I think that injury that he picked up in November has taken a lot longer to really get back to where he wants to be. Pre-season, he hasn't exactly sort of set the world on fire so far, but now is when it really matters, and perhaps going back to his old stomping ground, that can really sort of light the fire, and he can show the James Maddison that we all know he can be, and how crucial he can be to Tottenham's ambitions this season. Because whilst there are some exciting young midfielders around him, no more so than Lucas Bergvall, who seems like a very similar kind of profile to Maddison, still at this point there's only one player who's really can be elite on his day, at least at this stage of their career, all their careers, and that's James Maddison. So be interesting to see what happens from there. And one player that I think could be quite crucial in reopening the door to that talent for Maddison is Dominic Solanke. Remember, Maddison hasn't played with a sort of traditional centre forward apart from Richarlison when he's been fit during his time at Spurs. I mean, Son was brilliant last year filling in up top, but he obviously has a different profile to a Solanke. And the more I think about Solanke, the more I think he's just a really, really great fit for where Spurs are at right now. He's someone that has obviously been on quite a up and down journey in his career, and I know people will have question marks over his goal records, over a course of seasons, because it's only last year where he really showed what he can do and really hit those kind of numbers that can justify, in the modern day price tag, a 65 million transfer fee. But when you go through exactly what he does and what he brings to the party, specifically scoring goals in the penalty box, holding the ball up, bringing others into play, and very much to the point with Postecoglou team being an unbelievable presser up front, the most pressing striker in the Premier League last year, he's just perfect for it. And perhaps with that ability, that can really be a crucial part for for helping Maddison get back to where he needs to be at. Solanke, Postecoglou, that was the first question he was asked about at his press conference, and he essentially said, yeah, he was ready to go for the Leicester game. I would pretty much expect him to be in from pretty much from the off, and he's one that to very much to watch out for. I mean, apart from that, when it came to the rest of the press conference, I mean, injury-wise, the team looked in a pretty good space. Richarlison, who's obviously now second choice centre forward, you'd think, perhaps even less so than that if Ange still prefers to go with Son through the middle. He has been training. He is good in Postecoglou's words, but Postecoglou said that he's going to need match minutes over the coming weeks. So you can expect him to be playing games off the bench here and there before he sort of builds himself up. And Richarlison's a really interesting situation because Tottenham, I'm pretty sure, if they could get their money back, they would sell him. Richarlison doesn't want to go to Saudi Arabia, at least. You know, he wants to play at a high level. I think he's talked about Spurs being very much his home. He wants to stay. I still think that's one to watch between now and the end of the window. It was obviously proven that they could still sign Solanke without selling Richarlison, which I think had been mooted. That's obviously proven not to be the case because they brought in Solanke already, and I think having the two of them could be really, really useful going into this season. But I still feel like it's going to be something to watch. So let's look at the Leicester game and what the kind of team that Spurs might be looking to play. So, you know, obviously a lot of it picks itself. Vicario, goalkeeper, Pedro Porro right back, Christian Romero I imagine would come in at centre back. And now I think left back's going to be interesting. I mean, obviously Van de Ven would start at centre back if in the first choice 11, but Destiny Udogie has literally only had 45 minutes against Bayern Munich. Now, some of the other players have only had a very short amount of time too, like Romero, like Bentancur, but they're not the ones coming back from injury like Udogie has. So whether he's up to speed to start the game, we'll wait to see. If he doesn't start, my hunch would be that maybe Van de Ven goes to left back, something that took a while for Ange to sort of dabble with last season. And he has tried Spence playing at left back, who seems to have had a bit of a redemption over the summer, and he definitely looks like he's one to be part of the squad. But I don't think, albeit it was against Serge Gnabry, so that's about as hard as it gets in world football, but I don't think from what we've seen so far he's perhaps the answer at left back. And Van de Ven, I actually thought, because he's such an amazing player, did pretty well towards the end of last season there, allowing Dragusin to come at centre back. So I wonder if he might go with that again. We'll see. Then obviously there's no Bissouma, so it's kind of wide open. It'd be interesting to see if he goes straight with Gray straight away. He's obviously signed for big money. He backs young players, so that would not be a surprise. But I think the fact that Bentancur had a pretty good game off the bench means that he's got a good chance too. But no, I think Gray. I think we're going to start with Gray. Maddison, you think would start. Sarr, you think he'd start, even though Bergvall's pushing. And then I think Solanke starts from the beginning. Son starts off the left. That's something we're definitely going to see way more this season. Seeing Solanke play seeing Son play left side. And then on the right, I think it's a straight shootout between Kulusevski and Johnson. Kulusevski's had a very good pre-season, but he hasn't really played out wide that much. It's more been through the middle, and I wonder if going forward he is often viewed more in that position. Johnson offers you a very different profile, and perhaps to begin with, he might look to start with Kulusevski and then the Johnson-Werner off the bench if they're looking to sort of change things after the break. But we'll see how it goes. Second season for Ange. He's won the league in all his second seasons at his clubs, which is an unbelievable statistic when you think about it, and shows you how much things can change very, very quickly. It's obviously a massively different level at the Premier League. It would be one of the greatest stories in Premier League history if he could manage to do that at this club. But I think there's a lot to be optimistic about from a Spurs point of view, and it all gets started against Leicester. So let's see what happens.